All right, so today you can have a chat about routines, which is something you focus on a lot in your course and place a high value on it. Sort of one of those really pragmatic mental tools, for want of a better word, that athletes can use. And I guess typically, when we think of a routine, it's like a set procedure that we follow. Most people have like a morning routine or a bed routine, which is absolutely the case and something we focus on. But the other examples that a lot of people probably don't think of when they hear routine is things like your warm up before you train and your pre-fight ritual and your corner routine in between rounds and that type of thing. So yeah, share with us the secret skill of routines.
I think the secret is there is no secret, man. It's like it's repetition. You got to get the mental reps in. It's just like anything. The more you prepare, the better you're going to be. So preparing, using your routines as part of your preparation, I think, can be a really powerful tool. It's a mental skill. It helps to, I guess, reduce the amount of stress in the system. If you're in a routine that tends to kind of normalize what's happening around you. So obviously fight night is a really good example where sometimes our emotional regulation or our ideal performance state, it might be elevated compared to training, where training is like you're used to that environment, you're comfortable in that environment, and you kind of just get into it, you start working. Whereas fight night, there's always these different things going on. You're fighting someone different. It's a different venue. You're not at the same time in the card every time. Maybe you're the main event. Maybe you're starting the card. Like, who knows? It's always different. So having a bit of a routine to get yourself into an ideal performance state, let's say, can be a really powerful tool just to normalize the experience, get you to the fight without burning up all that adrenaline before you actually step in the octagon or in the ring or, on the mat, whatever it might be. So yeah, does that make sense? So like, for example, let's say a pre-fight routine might be, I know there's a couple of videos on YouTube with Rickson Gracie talking about what he used to do before fights. So he talked about 5 hours before a fight where, the first 3 hours he'd be asleep. So he's sleeping for 3 hours. Then 2 hours before the fight, he'll wake up, go through his routine, whatever it might be. He didn't go into full detail, but he kind of amplified breathing as part of his routine. So maybe half an hour, 45 minutes out, he elevates his heart rate to about 130, 140 to break a sweat, warm the body. And then the 10 minutes before he actually walks out, he goes into his relaxation strategies. One of them is obviously breathing. I don't know if you've ever seen his breathing techniques where he uses his diaphragm, sucks the belly in and out. He kind of does that whole thing. And he brings his heart rate down to like 80 or 90 beats. So when he's making the walk out, he's warm, but his heart rate's very low. And he talks about getting into the fight where, the other guy might be already at 120, 130 at the start of the fight. He's starting at 90. So when he starts the fight, he puts his foot on the gas, he engages, he gets into the grapple, the exchange, whatever it might be in the pocket. And as the fight carries on, the other person's heart rate keeps elevating. So when that person's at 160, he's only just hit 110, 120. When that guy gets to his max, where it's 170, 180, 190, whatever it is, depending on your age and all those other factors, he's only just get up to 140, 150. And he reckons he's finished a lot of fights because they get to that elevated level and they become disorientated. They panic. They can't recover fast enough. And that's when he puts in the killer blow. So that's just one example of, he's obviously refined that over time. He's a very experienced individual. So if you're starting your career, learning where you need to be before the fight to maximize your performance, there's so many things that could go out of, that are out of your control. But if you can manage the internal state, get into the ring with composure, the heart rate's not too high, it's not too low, which is kind of where you need it to be, then you're more rational. You have more access to that higher order thinking that, to be able to enforce the game plan.
Yeah. So I guess right there, you've really, outlined a pre-performance routine as opposed to a morning routine. So I guess, like you said, and you focused on an objective. So why do we have a routine? Well, I think, as you've said, we're trying to normalize the emotional experience, certainly in a pre-competition, a pre-performance routine. But I guess the key there is that your routine has a goal to serve. So a morning routine has a very different goal to serve than a pre-performance routine. What that goal is, that the routine's function is obviously to achieve that, and to do so in a way that is effective for you and your own individual goals, which are unique and personality types. So I guess a pre-performance routine, which I love this, your focus as the goal is really to regulate the heartbeat and keep the heart rate under control. So then you're at your optimal state. It's not about getting into some magic mindset where you feel invincible and then you go out and bring out some performance that you weren't capable of. That it really goes full circle, which I think will link into what I want to ask you about as well with all your other routines. So it's like the performance routine is to help you perform what you're capable of performing at that level. It's not about some magic thing, but it's getting you where you're not overly stimulated because it is an event, as you said. So it's just about performing at your peak. So I guess that leads into there is no magic state of mind that you get into and everything's slow motion to you and you have all these new skills. What are we doing with our other routines?
Yeah, so compare that to your training routine. Your warm-ups. Everybody warms up before they train. That's getting the body activated, getting the muscle groups activated to engage in whatever it is. So when you're doing you're a coach. When you're coaching your athletes, before you start, you have a general kind of routine, and it's pretty similar each time, isn't it? Like if it's not exactly the same, there might be some variations, but depending on the training session or what you have planned for that training session, you warm up the body. So there's a physical element to your routine, your warm up, which is a routine. Adding in something to get you mentally prepared for that training session too is also, if you can integrate that into your warm up, that can be really powerful too, because it gets you switching on. It gets you, let's say, maximizing how much you're getting out of that training session. Now, I think everybody's had that experience where you go to training and it's just kind of done like that. And, it was a good training session, whatever, but there wasn't like, what did you actually get out of that? What did you learn from that session? Is it just kind of turned up, ripped in and then left? To me, there's more you can take away. So if you're mentally aware of what you're trying to do in that training session, then at the end of it, you absorb the learning, like those techniques, you elevate the amount of evolution you can kind of build up if you enter that training session with a particular purpose. Like you said, each kind of routine, depending on the purpose, it serves a different purpose. And if you engage in it correctly, you can maximize how close you get to that purpose. So if it's a jiu-jitsu training session, that's a different warm-up to, say, a weights session, right? Like it's a completely different warm-up because you're doing a completely different thing. It's the same with your mindset. So maybe the technical aspect of the jiu-jitsu session is more important than actually maybe the effort part of the weight session. Does that kind of make sense? Not that they take different, like you always want to give 100% effort, but in terms of like the physical effort in a weight session, it's different to the physical effort in a jiu-jitsu session, where I think the learning is probably more important, the technical aspect of the roles, you know what I mean? The different procedures. What do I do in this position? What do I do in that position? Whereas a weight session, let's say it's a power session and you're doing plyometrics. Well, how do you, each set is maybe 4 or 5 reps. You're doing 2 or 3 of those sets. What are you thinking about in those 4 or 5 reps? What are you trying to do? How are you maximizing the benefits of that exercise?
Right. So I guess the advantage then of your routine specific to your technical sessions is that is an activity that mimics the kind of performance that you're looking to do in the cage. So that's one that, in terms of normalizing the experience and regulating heart rate and getting your body prepared for the goal of that activity, I guess telling athletes, and for myself as an athlete, I want to have a pre-training routine. I'm talking, again, not at weights. I'm talking about skills training that I'm going to then use in the fight. And that's the same thing, prepares my body physiologically to be the same. And that means I need to have an approach to my training where I take it, seriously, or as serious as I'm going to take my fight, somewhat. So I mimic that appropriately, which I think is very useful. So it's like, yeah, work out how you're going to warm up and what you're going to do, in terms of moving your body and everything. And then,
like, what's the focus of that? Like the focus of the training. So if you're integrating that mental preparedness as part of your warm up for that training session, then you're more fixated and focused on what you're actually trying to do. So maybe that training session, you're coming up with some sort of game plan, or maybe it's just striking. I'm working on my right cross. How effective can I be with my right cross? That's my goal for today. There's obviously a lot more to the training session, but today I'm going to really focus on trying to get this snapping back, or being loose, or whatever it is. But having that as a specific purpose for the training session, integrating that into your warm up, so you're activating the body, ready for training. But if as an athlete, and you have these conversations with your coaches, like, what kind of things do I need to focus on my game? How do I improve? What kind of things do I need to clean up, polish? What are those things? It might be different every time, but thinking about, what am I actually doing here? What's the purpose of this training session? What am I trying to get out of today? It can't just be turning up and giving 100%. There's got to be more to it. Like, if you really want to evolve and elevate your mixed martial arts game, every session counts. Every session counts. Every minute, every round, they all add up. They all compound. And if you're not maximizing the mental aspect of it in those things, not that you're wasting time, but it's just going to take longer for you to kind of absorb the learning. So every time you engage in a new behavior or a new technique, or you're learning something new and you actually do it physically, you're creating neural pathways in your brain. Your brain is adapting to those movements. If you're more aware of what you're trying to do, you're going to elevate that internal, the left and the right brain talking to each other. Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it really highlights the importance of, the athletes need to, work out the pre-performance routine and do that every day, practicing it in the training sessions. And as you say, that same, what am I focused on in this session? I think that replicates very much so the conditions of a fight, where you should have, 2 or 3 really key tactical points for your opponent. What that is, like, do I have to take the center? Do I have to cage cut? Do I have to initiate a brawl before shooting? Whatever those things are for that tactic, is it, 1, 2 punches at most to move? Going through those key objectives as you would in every other session, is practice of that. So then when you go to perform and the stakes are high, you're now able to do that very effectively because you've practiced it, not because of the magic pre-performance routine that only breaks out, before a fight. So I think that's very pragmatic. So I guess that's kind of a nice little, overview of a pre-performance routine. You have to have a goal, and then you have to practice it for that to work. So I guess I also want to link into, some of the other routines that are essential, because basically your day is built, out of routines. So the other ones that, you're always talking about, sleep, morning, night, and that. So do you just want to share some of the other routines that aren't your fight specific pre-performance, pre-training routine?
Yeah, I think it's important to just highlight, we're human first. That's what we are first. We're human beings, and then depending on what we do, we create an identity for ourselves. So if you're a fighter, okay, you're a fighter, but you're a human first. You're an athlete or a fighter second. That comes after. So looking after the system, like the physical system, because this is the vehicle that's going to take you on this journey. So sleep is a massive one. Sleep, nutrition, and physical activity. But if you're fighting and you're training, you're kind of ticking that physical activity box already. So then you kind of got to hone in on your nutrition and your sleep. So when you talk about sleep, I think there's a misconception that, you need 8 hours sleep every day. I don't know if that's 100% true for everybody. I think it's not so much about the number of hours, it's more about the quality of your sleep. And if you don't have one, just consider the idea of having a night routine. How do you wind down before you actually get into bed? How do you slow the mind chatter down? How do you put the day that you just had, put it down and get to sleep? How do you do that? Because a lot of us might be on our phones, we might be tossing and turning a little bit. We're in bed, but we're not sleeping. How long does it take from when you actually get into bed to actually being asleep? How long is that? And if you can reduce that, you might improve the quality of your sleep. So a night routine might be something like, a lukewarm shower, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes before you actually, turn in. Then, getting your room kind of dark, quiet, putting all the multimedia stuff away, putting the phone on charge away from your bed so you have like easy access to it. Some people like reading. Some people like watching something and falling asleep while the TV is on. Like whatever, there's no one blanket kind of answer for everybody. Everybody's got a different way of doing things. But you can tell whether you've had a quality sleep if you feel rested when you wake up. Everyone's going to be a bit lethargic when they first wake up. You just woke up from a sleep. But how long does it take for you to switch back on again as soon as you wake up? If that takes a long time, you need to consider the quality of your sleep. You might have slept for 8 hours, but if it takes you an hour to kind of switch back on again, I would argue that maybe the quality of your sleep isn't that good. And maybe you only need 6 hours, but you worked on something before, like in your night routine, to wind down and prepare the system, the body for sleep. You might actually get a better quality sleep with less hours potentially.
Yeah, excellent. Look, I think that's very well articulated there, which links to the other thing which you did touch on there, the fact that we are all human, and I guess planning in those routines for the fact that you are human. So it's not just everything's train, eat, sleep, because as a psychologist, how important are things like relationships and that for your mental health and consequently your performances.
Oh, it's massive, right? The whole idea of social emotional well-being is a lot more mainstream now. It's actually really powerful. And I guess we don't want to kind of people talk about balance. Sometimes people talk about balance being 50-50. If you're an elite athlete or you have aspirations of going through the levels and getting to UFC or whatever it might be, maybe it's Australian titles, maybe it's state titles, it doesn't matter. If your goal is to progress through those levels, then you have to consider how to maximize, your overall well-being to match that. So in terms of balance, it can't be 50-50, because if you're trying to be 50-50 with everything and have that balance, there's guys that are training 90% all the time, but the 10% is quality. So when they have those social interactions, it's quality. When they have the downtime, it's quality. When they're engaging in activities that, where they can kind of just disengage from, the professional athlete kind of lifestyle, it's quality. But that 90% of their time is made up of training, eating, recovering, training, eating, recovering all the time. And they've got that other 10%, but that's balance. They've found that balance within themselves. So yeah, I don't want to I'm hesitant to say balance because people go straight away to 50-50. Yeah, I've got to balance these things out. No, man. If you want to be the best, you've got to train more than everyone else, and you've got to train better than the rest, right? Like that's just the way it goes. But if you're balanced within yourself, that's a different type of balance. Like if you understand the commitment and the effort and the persistence and the diligence in your training, all those type of things, but you also have that same attitude with the downtime when you're not training, when you're not competing, in your relationships, if you have those meaningful relationships and you're giving the same kind of effort there, that's internal balance. That's not throwing things out. Some guys go 100% into the training and the fighting and everything, and then all the other things around them kind of fall away. And it's because they're not managing those relationships. Maybe you're a student athlete. You can't give the same amount of time to your studies you can to your training and stuff, but you can give the same kind of attitude. So the time you spend with your study, with your assignments, with your exam preparation, all that kind of stuff, it can still be really effective if you have the kind of same attitude, the same mindset when you engage in that activity. So yeah, you understand what I'm kind of getting at? Like it's very different for everybody.
So look, that is something that personally I think I struggled with greatly as a younger athlete, and now as a coach, that's something that I'm very passionate about with my younger students, with getting that message across to them that obviously that there is a large amount of sacrifice that has to be made, but you are a human being and you do need to have social emotional well-being looked after. Otherwise, you won't be motivated to train. You will be depressed and not happy, and you won't be you're not healthy, and that's the goal at the end of the day, and that is more important. And anyone who places achievements above the goal of health, I think's got it wrong, and that's that's a subjective thing. But my own experiences and very passionate about that. And I would say that most of the high performers, by far the majority. I know there is a minority that aren't, but they do. Yeah, but the majority does do an excellent job of exactly what you outlined there. They have balance. So quite often in jiu-jitsu, you see people who they have a partner that also trains. So that way they're not always, away, and they share that with their partner. They have friends at the gym. So that way they don't have to go out, on the piss every Friday, Saturday night. They've got genuine mates that they get to see a couple of times a week. And that's a beautiful thing. Then the other big one is they work. There's this thing where young fighters don't want to work and earn money or anything, but the reality is it's a long journey, and some slip through it, and the majority don't, though, and you don't peak until later in life. And I think it's not, no, you can't work the same as if your focus was just to make money, but you do need to work, because otherwise, again, you're not looking after your family, your relationships, you're not looking after yourself. And as a person, I think, you should be self-reliant in that. So I think, you need to have, an intimate relationship at some point to be, healthy. You need to have some friends to be healthy. You need to have some work, and then you need to have, your sport and hobby. So if you've got most of them set up, one going wrong, you'll get by. But I think that the biggest issue that, certainly myself suffered from, and I see all the time, is when everything is just your sport, just the next event. And then that puts you this incredible pressure on every performance, because you're living and dying by the sword. And that's just not the case. And so again, I really like that, how you said, it can't be 50-50, because that's right. You can't be going out for social dinners on a Tuesday night and a Thursday night, and drinking on a Friday and going, oh no, it's balance. It's like, no, you do have to say, but you do have to address those other components. And I think we've outlined what they are quite well. So that's, the other and last thing really that I think is important with routines is what happens when things go outside of our control. So obviously our routine has a goal that we want it to meet. What do we do when, the conditions in which that routine is designed to function aren't met? They change rapidly, or, so something goes on. I guess an example from the weekend, we had the Usman Burns fight, and there's a great example where, emotional regulation and all that. It's like Usman got dropped real early on by a big right. And it's like, okay, everything's gone weird. So he's got his routine. Yeah, now I'm cool. And, he did an excellent job of maintaining composure and come back and, had an awesome performance using his jab to win the fight, getting 2 knockdowns off it, which is an incredible feat in its own. But I mean, that's the question. So what do? Do you plan in a backup routine? Or?
I feel like when Burns dropped him, he lost his composure. You know what I mean? I feel like he felt like that was, and I'm only making speculation here, but it seemed to me that when that happened, he felt like that was his opportunity and he missed it. Because after that knockdown, he was a step off. Something had shifted. Like I feel like he lost his composure. He didn't stick to his game plan. He didn't keep executing the same things. Like he got Usman with a couple of heavy shots, but like you said, Usman maintained his composure, stuck to his game plan, and it paid off. Where I think Burns didn't expect to get him that early, and that threw him off. Like he almost had that adrenaline, like, oh, this is it, I'm gonna do it, and then it didn't work. You know what I mean? It didn't happen, and that kind of threw him off a little bit. And I think that's when he started to kind of fade away a little bit. What were your thoughts?
I think 100% he has, and Usman did the opposite, maintain composure beautifully through it. And Burns did. He thought, oh, I've got the kill, and then it didn't work out. And then it's, going down the roller coaster of emotion of, oh no, now I'm in for a fight. No, now I, whatever.
But before that, he was in it, man. He was right there with Usman. It didn't seem like he was that far off the pace. I think the fact that Usman had, a couple more championship fights, he's been in that moment before. This is the first time for Burns. I mean, you could tell by his kind of reaction after the ref called it. He was overwhelmed by emotion. That meant a lot to him. And I think that's what makes me think in that moment he lost his composure, because he was so emotionally invested in that fight. And I think if he was able to maintain his composure and not go off the highs and lows of what's happening in the moment there, it might have turned out differently. I think Usman still wins that fight just by experience. But to kind of answer your question, like, what do you do in that moment when things aren't working out for you? What's the routine there? I think it comes back to training, man. You know, what do you do in training? You get up and you go again. Okay, that didn't work. All right, stick to the game plan. I got him. That's cool. You know, and keep chipping away, and not get so. It felt like he got amped up, like, oh, this is it, you know. And then that, you know, he just kind of he blew his load, man. He had nothing left.
You get to go back in time as a sports psychologist. You're working with Burns. You know what he's done wrong, and you know you're seeing him. You're working with him. What do you do? What do you do? You know, as a sports psych, because you know that the potential for that's there. So I know you talked about training and that. Like, what's your plan of attack?
I think that the biggest mistake a lot of athletes make is they get to the big dance, they get to that moment, and they feel like, or they think that they have to lift, they have to bring something extra. There's got to be something special I've got to do because it's the big one. This is the big dance. And that couldn't be further from the truth, man. Like, whatever you've done up until this point has got you to that. It's got you the opportunity. It's put you in that position. We want to keep doing the same thing. We don't want to change anything. We want to maintain what we've been doing because that's what's got us here. In those big moments, that big dance, whether it's the international championship, if it's the UFC title fight, if it's the NRL grand final, dude, it's another day at the office. That's what it's got to be like, you know? And I guess if I was working with him, I would have been focused on that, you know? This is just another fight, dude. You know, what are we trying to do here? What got you here? What works? How do you know it works? What got you here? And in the moment, when the time comes, you'll get a natural rise. You'll get a natural adrenaline rush when you need it. You don't have to pump yourself up before you get there because you're just burning up fuel. You're burning up all that adrenaline, all that energy, all that that extra little bit, that pep in the step. You're burning it up. Let's not do that. Let's put the fuel in the fuel tank. Let's keep it there. Keep doing what you normally do. And in the moment, it'll come when you need it. You don't have to force it because it's a fucking title fight. You know, it's going to come up whether you like it or not. So instead of trying to force it, instead of trying to get something a little bit extra out of yourself, it's going to come. I think you've got to trust in your training. You've got to trust in the preparation. But that's what I would have worked on with him, man. It's just maintaining an even keel, maintaining composure. I do an activity with a lot of guys called the what if activity. You know, what if this happens? What if that happens? So one of them would have been, what if you get him early and he doesn't go down? What do you do then? You know, what if it's 2-2 and you go into the fifth? What do you do then? What if you feel like you got nothing left and you're sitting on the stool and you're busted up and you got, you know, 3 more rounds to go? What do you do then? Where's your head at? And go through those kind of scenarios. What if you're in front? What if you're dominating but you can't get the finish? What do you do then? You know, what if you're on top? You know, what if you're in mount and he won't go away and he's just finding a way to kind of stay alive? What do you do then? You know, what if he's got you in a fucking triangle or the armbar? How do you get out of it? What do you do then? What if you've got him in a submission and he gets out? What do you do then? And just go for these scenarios and just kind of get that mental imaging there. But because we're doing it in a controlled kind of state, it won't, you know, you won't go down the rabbit hole, right? Like it won't get any worse because we'll stop it and go, okay, this is what we do. This is a solution. Cool. All right, let's get back to training. You know what I mean? So there's effective ways to do that. Sometimes a lot of guys can, you know, fight the fight a million times before they get to the fight. That's because they're talking to themselves. They've got that internal dialogue. It's just happening upstairs. They're getting caught up in their minds. If you've got someone you can talk to, you know, in this case, maybe a sports psych, or it could be your coach. You might go through that process with your coach. It's a really good one for coaches. What do you do in this situation? What do you do in that situation? Okay, here's a scenario. Boom. What do you do? And you start building those kind of thought processes. So if it comes up, oh, yeah, I've already done this in my mind. I know what to do. Oh, I've got him early. He's not going down. Okay, back to the start. Let's start again. chip away, chip away.
Oh, I think that's a brilliant response. I think, as a coach and athlete, that's again, incredibly valuable, to myself, and yeah, as usual, very pragmatic, and it's in your preparation. But yeah, I love it, and I think, yeah, that's some very insightful information, from a practical and an understanding point of view surrounding routines and how athletes can start to use them. So, yeah, thank you, Marcel. I really enjoyed that conversation.
All right, let's do more of these anyway. So, any questions? Pump them in the comments. We're happy to talk about whatever. Rocky Balboa. Yeah, I got to fight like Rocky Balboa. Yeah, I got to fight.